So good. Okay, we've got people connecting with us here for round two, and I'm sure we'll have some others as well as people find their way. And good job, everybody. I know that negotiating the links and getting back and forth between Swapcard and elsewhere is challenging. So if you're here, good job. So with me, I'm Angie Redicott from Ambrose University. I'm one of the organizers of the forum here, and very excited to have Paul Draffin with us, who is the Chief Supply Chain Officer at Canadian Tire. So anything you see in Canadian Tire or any of their other stores or brands, Paul has worked to get here, which we know in the last I guess about 8 months has been a challenge. So Paul, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Do you want to just remind us, I'm pretty sure everybody here has been at a Canadian Tire, but what are some of the other stores or brands that
Sure.
that you guys operate?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So in terms of retail banners, in addition to Canadian Tire Retail, I should say PartSource, Marks, FGL, which is really focused on the sporting goods and athletic footwear and apparel businesses, Sport Check, Sportix Fair, Atmosphere, Pro Hockey Life, National Sports, to name a few. In terms of brands that we own that are in our stores, where we're kind of deeply involved, not just in the sourcing but the design and development. At Marks, Denver Hayes, Dakota. In Canadian Tire Retail, Motomaster, Mastercraft, Noma, Perderno, Yardworks, amongst a variety of other brands that we own.
That sounds like a lot of work. Our family's pretty active, so Atmosphere, Sport Check. We like your other stores too, but those are our main ones. So I know that Canadian Tire broadly, and we want to mostly talk about retail, but I'll still use the term Canadian Tire to capture everything.
Yes.
We know that Canadian Tire sources supplies from a lot of different places. What are some of the countries that your supply chain reaches?
Yeah, sure. I mean, if we think about Asia, including all of Southeast Asia, again, as I mentioned, we had a vendor call. We had a supplier call with about 500 vendors a couple of weeks ago, and we had suppliers from 9 different countries, in no specific order: Bangladesh, India, Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, Myanmar, Cambodia, Vietnam, China, Hong Kong, Taiwan, South Korea, and in North America, of course, Canada, the U.S., Mexico. Not a lot in the Middle East, but we do have some supply out of Israel with a couple of key vendors, and that about covers it.
Thank you. And just as we're talking, folks, feel free, if you have questions, you can put them in the chat. You can also use the raise your hand feature, and we can call on you live. If you are talking live, just share your screen, which I encourage you to do. You can see us, so we like to see you too. But Paul, talk to us just a little bit about, I'll say, the evolution of social compliance at Canadian Tire. One thing I'm learning is that you have to get, I guess, closer to your suppliers to know what's going on, and you've got a complex supply chain. Like how do you do that?
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I think, of course, social compliance, at the heart of social compliance is I think doing the right thing. I think we know, what's really important to underscore is that we know that vendors that don't comply, you make the grade in terms of social compliance. I mean, they don't provide adequate wages, or they try and cheat in terms of the benefits they would provide, or they provide unsafe work conditions for their employees. So guess what? Their turnover is high. We know this. It's very high. So how can a producer that doesn't take care of their people, therefore is constantly losing their people and having to replenish, how can they consistently produce a high level of quality? They can't. So there is no point, if you're focused on delivering consistent product quality, if you own your own products and your own trademarks like we do. Quality is everything. Where no one in our organization, not the CEO, not a CBM or a buyer, is going to sacrifice product quality to conduct business with the vendor where they think there might be better costs. So at the heart of it is doing the right thing because it matters. And the truth is, the commercial needs of the business are no different than the needs of the underlying employees that are producing those goods. They expect to be treated fairly. They expect, proper wages. They expect, healthy and good working conditions. And we expect those things because ultimately we know it manifests into good quality products. So these things are not at odds with one another. Ultimately, in terms of how you manage that, is you need to be close to the suppliers. Again, not all retailers are the same. Not all businesses are the same. We don't work with trading companies that put put additional parties between ourselves and the vendors that actually produce our goods. We have staff. I don't know what the exact number is, but in Asia today, right from Hong Kong right across, we have probably about 250 staff in total, full-time employees. We have offices in Dhaka, Chittagong, and Bangladesh, in Vietnam, Myanmar, Cambodia, China, Hong Kong. So, and they what do? Well, they many of them, they're engineers, or they're working in quality, and social compliance is one aspect of that. But they're actually with the factories weekly, monthly, depending on what they're focused on, depending on what they're working on, whether they're designing and developing new products that are coming to market, whether they're managing compliance, whether they're doing quality control, which is a big part of what we do. But they're constantly engaging, there's ongoing and active engagement all the time with the actual producers that are making goods for us. And I think that if you're not doing that, then it becomes a matter of academics in terms of social compliance. The vendor may have their certifications, but do you really know? And again, we don't let vendors into our ecosystem that haven't gone through comprehensive engineering assessments, what we call pre-factory audits. That includes all of the basics of social compliance. Again, that's table stakes. We intend having no conversations. Doesn't matter what you produce or what you're capable of doing if you can't check the box in terms of the most basic standards of social compliance. So I think there's lots of things that are constantly ongoing, and that inform feedback back to folks at home office that more objectively are getting intelligence and reporting that inform. Are there gaps? Are there things that we need to work on, or do we need to have constructive dialogue with a certain vendor regarding an issue that we found? So that information is being reported back through our systems, the way that we set up our reporting mechanisms with our vendors and our compliance teams. That then will inform whether action needs to be taken or whether we're in good shape.
That's interesting. From the outside looking in, I think many of us think, okay, well, social compliance, corporate social responsibility, that sits over here, and then operations sits over here. But you're giving us a very integrated picture. These things have to work together. I guess along that line, or differently, what's something that you think you guys have really improved at? We'll say over the last, 7 years. I think you've been with Canadian Tire for 7 years. Yeah. What have you really improved at in this space?
I think one of the biggest things that relates to social compliance is, and it's like anything else, the more parties you do business with, the more complexity you're adding to your business, and the more difficult. Every new supplier, every vendor is another relationship that has to be managed. So first things first, and again, these things are aligned. Number one, fewer suppliers is always better. So we have curated and edited our assortment of suppliers. We are down, I would say, almost 20% over the course of the last 6 or 7 years. We buy from about 20% fewer vendors. It doesn't mean that we haven't changed or we've had to move with the business, but our total supplier count is down. Where our business has grown by, a CAGR, compounded annual growth rate of 5%, let's say, but our total vendor count is down by 20%. Fewer suppliers to manage, fewer relationships to manage, and fewer concerns. Where we consolidate business into fewer suppliers, it just makes things easier. So that's one thing for sure. The other thing that is this using kind of a common standard. And I mentioned I used to work in the toy and entertainment business, where there was a lot of movement within that industry to if you're a vendor producing and selling to Walmart, for example, you'd have their COC, or their code of conduct standard, which is difficult. If you had to license under Disney, you'd have ILS, or International Labor Standards, which is different. And then the toy standard, ICT, or International Council of Toy Industries, you've got all these different standards. Well, that industry, that collectively in the toy industry agreed, let's just have one standard, and they all agreed to use ICTI. We are trying to do the right thing ourselves in terms of advocating, and also with other kind of major retailers that we compete with, to align with one standard. Internally, I can tell you 7 years ago, we had several. We were using RAP, we were using WCA, and we were using BSCI. So not only with the acquisition of Helly Hansen, but as we've integrated social compliance across our banners, today we have one strategy. That is an enterprise strategy that covers all the retailers that I mentioned. 7 years ago, no, Marks has their strategy. Sport Chek has their strategy. Canadian Tire Retail has its strategy. So we comply across our entire enterprise, including Helly Hansen, again, a different business unit, with one standard, which is the Business and Social Compliance Initiative, or BSCI. So I think these are big advancements for us because they have one standard as opposed to multiple, and one rigor in terms of what is it we're trying to live up to, what is it that we need to do differently, and how does that inform sourcing decisions we have to make, or supplier performance and reporting, so that we are kind of all focused on doing things in a common way. So in short, in long, we have fewer suppliers, one, and we have a common standard. I think those are the two biggest things. And again, we've continued to invest in localizing talent in the countries of origin in which we source. And really the collection of those three things, I think, are the biggest advancements we've made.
Thank you. It's interesting. I mean, so many companies now, are stating that they wish to, have better supply chains, but just hearing the intentionality and the detail that goes behind making that happen. I also appreciate some of the things that you're talking about are centralized, especially now with having the common standards, but yes, there's still that on the ground piece. Digging in a little bit more, I guess, on that on the ground piece. Mm-hmm. Do people work together? So, I mean, you've got competitors. I know it's fiercely competitive in the retail world. On the ground, you've got different stores or, companies using the same factory. Like, what does that look like in terms of how it works on the ground?
Yeah, and it's different depending on categories. I'll give you a different example. In the footwear and apparel space, which I think has been more, in a sense, it's easier. When you think about hard goods, there are enormous investments in automation and hard tooling costs, without getting too complicated. The hard tooling that goes into produce those products, whether it includes, injection molded, or it's got metal components, whether that's batteries and motors and these kinds of things. And the production of most electronic products across Asia is largely out of China. If it's in Vietnam, then I can tell you the subcomponents are being sourced out of China. So it kind of simplifies the supply chain. It's a bit easier, frankly speaking, because there are only so many quality producers that can produce products that can meet a UL or a CSA approval or a CUL approval. When you get into footwear and apparel, that's quite different. So then Rana Plaza and the incident that happened many years ago in Bangladesh with the factory collapsing that impacted all the workers that were there. So there is a lot more, while there is cooperation at some level between ourselves and a Home Depot or a Walmart within common categories, the tool business is one of them. If I switch gears and look at the footwear and apparel business, no one wants to have Rana Plaza happen again. So you have coalition groups that are set up that crossover retailers and crossover brands. So we are part of a coalition group, I can tell you, in Bangladesh, for example, that the Gap is part of, Abercrombie Fitch is part of it, the North Face is part of it, and various other retailers are part of it, where we are all trying to do the right thing by adhering to the same standards. So it's kind of all for one and one for all, meaning if it's not fit for one of us to do business, then none of us will do business. So that business is a bit different because of the challenges that were created coming out of Rana Plaza. There's more direct collaboration between our brand and our business with some of the other retailers in that space. Again, it's a bit different with Canadian Tire Retail when you get into the hard goods business, where yes, we source from some of the same factories depending on the category, but we're a bit less intentional, I guess, in terms of how we work with our competitors.
And I'm actually just going to throw a link to one of the many stories on the Rana Plaza incident in the chat. But looking at, say, Bangladesh specifically, has it gotten better? I mean, that was like horrific and hit the news and coalitions. Is it better? For workers in Bangladesh, have things improved?
It is better. Look, to be fair, I can't comment on things that don't implicate us. I can say that the quality of the factories that we work with and that we have a view to, it's not a lot. It's about 25. They're all quite large, to be fair, and most of them are doing production for other kind of global household brands. The quality of facilities, the treatment of workers is very, very good. I can tell you we are deeply engaged with the BGMEA, which is the Bangladesh Garment Manufacturers Export Association. We know the president of that group very, very well. The way that the manufacturing organization in Bangladesh is working together, and the standards that they are setting for all manufacturers in Bangladesh to comply with are frankly very, very high. Nobody, including the manufacturers, want to go through that experience again. So the good and the bad of these kinds of things, of course, is that, sometimes it takes, I guess, a tragedy to spur necessary change. I don't think anyone wants to take the risk, whether it's the brands or even the manufacturers in Bangladesh. There's no going back. So there have been huge, huge improvements, not only in terms of workplace safety, but even the wages that workers are paid. Interestingly, while it's anecdotal, I can tell you, I mentioned this on the call a couple of weeks ago, we have suppliers that were forced to shut down due to COVID-19 earlier this year to deal with the pandemic. And I can tell you that of the factories that we work with, they all paid their employees. They didn't have to. There was no legal requirement to do so. They all paid their workers their full wages for 2 to 3 weeks while they were making zero revenue, no production. The factory was closed because it was the right thing to do, and because frankly they've got a talent that they wanted to get back as soon as they came back to work. So yes, I think there will always be more to do. I can't speak to all manufacturers. We don't work with all manufacturers, but I think that at least the coalition that we work with, we're trying to do the right thing. But massive improvements have been made from the time that of Rana Plaza.
That's encouraging. I mean, I've heard that from others too, that the bar is raising. Jordana is asking us though. I mean, things are getting better, but she's saying, Paul, what is keeping you at night in supply chains generally? What are the challenges that are still outstanding?
I mean, I'm assuming the question relates specifically to social compliance.
Well, it could be, but if not social compliance, what else?
Well, I think so. First of all, like it's supply chain is very broad. So as you mentioned at the beginning of the call, I mean, our business is up almost 25% this year. So being able to deliver that and handle the capacity, less from a production standpoint, to be fair, we've been quite resilient, and our vendors have responded well. More kind of even domestically in terms of our ability to process and handle that kind of volume, which is unprecedented for us. I think anyone in this space, anyone in supply chain should always, it doesn't keep me up at night. It's always on my mind, like it is on the mind of my VP and Managing Director for Asia, like it is on the mind of all of our global sourcing talent, the 101 of social compliance, right? I'm not, and again, that's partly emanates from who I am as a person. I'm not interested in checking a box because I'm worried about, a regulatory body or, worried about, a bad news story getting into the news cycle in terms of something we didn't like. I'm worried about protecting our brand. I'm worried about, Canadian Tire being, as relevant as it can to Canadians. And that while we focus in our language of, the jobs and joys for life in Canada, that we don't do it in a way that would bring harm to others. So, again, when you think of things that are the hottest of hot in terms of topics, which is providing people with the proper wages, making sure that they're treated not only humanely, but properly, in a health and safe and secure work environment, that they have a right to raise their concerns and communicate with the management organizations and the suppliers that they work with. These things they're so incredibly important to us. And really that's all the starting point, right? Like the truth is running our business is so much more complicated than that. We cannot afford to have these kinds of challenges or disruptions within our supply chain. So we curate and we work with, if I didn't say in this meeting, the average tenure of supplier that we work with in Canadian Tire retail specifically it's just shy of 20 years. We are focused. When the brands that we own, I mean, they as much belong to the vendors because they often own the tooling, the underlying tooling. So it's very difficult to kind of just, close up shop and move on to another vendor. That doesn't really work in our business. So we need to find great suppliers and we need to work well with them for over the long term. And so they are very much an extension of us. They're very much an extension of our business. And we expect in many respects that the employees that are producing goods for us are really an extension of our own payroll and of our own business. So while it doesn't keep me up at night, because I know we have bulletproof for all the right reasons, but it's always on the top of my mind in terms of making sure that we're doing the right thing. And when we get into, new countries and new sourcing and new regions that are, more emerging markets, Myanmar being one example, make sure we're investing up front to take in the necessary time and investment to find the right suppliers and work with them in development. These things are, these things are incredibly important, and they're always top of mind for, I think, anyone, for myself and everyone that reports into me, to be fair.
Thank you. It's we're at 10:40, so I know main stage is going to have a movement moment in starting up fairly quickly. So you're free to go. But if anybody else does have any questions, happy to stick around for a few more minutes. That can either be in the chat or it can be out loud. But would love to hear from you if anybody on the call has a specific question. And if not, I'm gonna, pardon?
Everyone's turning off their cameras, but for tonight.
Yeah, and now they're scared. Well, see, and I see a few of my students on here too. They're like, if she sees me, she might call on me. I do have a question. Now, Canadian Tire very much presents itself as, a Canadian company, etc.
Sure.
But Canadian Tire, I would say you don't talk a lot about this, in terms of, I mean, you've got some brands out there that they've kind of made it their brand is that they are, doing responsible business. Why not? Why isn't it more part of your brand?
Yeah, I think it's a big opportunity for us. I think there's a lot of sincerity and authenticity, frankly speaking, that exists within our company and the company that I work for. That's much bigger than, look, there are brands that want to get, they want to get praise, but is it really due? And is it really self-praise? I mean, in a sense, it's kind of the Canadian in us, right? We don't necessarily step into the light of the good things that we're doing. But however, I think we are changing and evolving and to do so in a positive way, because it's not only a good news story, but I think in a sense, it makes our customers and it makes Canadians more aware of perhaps the questions and the expectations they should have for others in not only retail but other brands that they work with. So I think we're definitely working on a more coordinated strategy to do a better job of telling our story and explaining ourselves to Canadians. But again, I think the history would show is we've not wanted to do it, not because the organization's not been doing a great job of it, but because it wanted to be authentic and it wasn't intending to kind of just take praise for the things it's doing, and almost an expectation for us that these things they're not even worthy of praise. They're really the most basic of maintaining of human rights and dignity of people around the world. And I think that's so deeply a part of us, frankly, as Canadians, that we don't even think about it. And unlike we have some American counterparts that love to go and love to talk in their mission statements about the things that they do, but that's really so they can get credit for it from their shareholders. So expect that to change a little bit as we, I think, again, step into light and bring more of our message to Canadians.
That's great. Well, thank you so much, Paul. I know your world, well, you said 25% increase in business, which means your world is really busy. So I appreciate you taking the time to spend with us. So I can applaud out loud, but
no problem.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
I appreciate it. And forum attendees, there's a link a little bit earlier in the chat that'll take you back to the main session, or just go back to swap card to the main stage. Thank you, everybody. And Paul, thank you.
All right.
Thanks everyone. Thanks, Angie.
Thank you, Angie. Thank you, Paul.
Bye-bye.